I want to do then is I want to get this distal end, or this kind of, really this is the work end of this, under control as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing we did with an exception here. I'm going to say create a splineIK handle. I really want to make sure I get this option box again. But this time I am going to say auto create a curve. Okay? So the software is going to create the curve for me. I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to click and click. All right, now it may look a little subtle there, but if you look over here, that line, that's the curve the software just made. That straight line. Okay? That was the default curve it made. All right, now what I want to do is take control of that curve. Okay, there's a number of ways I could do it, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to right mouse on that curve and say, give me a curve point. I'm going to left mouse, keep my mouse depressed and drag, and that little red dot I'm dragging is the curve point. I'm going to drag it all the way to the end of that straight curve. And it turns yellow. And the next thing I'm going to do is going to go under Deform, and I'm going to use a deformer called Point on Curve Deformer. Really isn't a lot you can change here. You could change the influence that point has, but we're going to leave it at 100%. Say create, and when I do that, I automatically get a locator that's positioned at that point. And that locator now is my control. Now there's one other step though, very important to recognize here. If I hit the W key, look where the pivot point for that locator is. It's down at default 0, 0, 0, right? So that's not going to help me at all. I want the pivot point right there. So who's trying to go to Hawaii today? Matthew. How do I get that pivot point right into that middle of that locator?
Snap it.
Say again?
Snap it to it.
Well, I can say modify, center pivot. Okay? And now the pivot point is directly on the center. All right, now if I move that pivot point, you can see now I can turn just the distal end, or I don't know what else to call it, the working end, if you will, of that scope. See the point? Okay. And let's see if we go back to our channel box here. If I change that value to 0, it by default goes back to its original position. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to animate the scope going through the stomach and the esophagus, and also animate that locator so that it looks like the distal end is preceding the rest of the scope. And then when we get to the point where we want to look like we're investigating, where the doctor is looking through the scope and seeing on the TV where he is and where they are and what's going on, then we want to have that scope actually move around a little bit, but have the rest of the scope stand still while just the distal end moves. Does that make sense, y'all? And that's what we did in that other thing. So you really have these two controls now. You've got the, and actually, to be honest with you, I have to work with the outliner to kind of keep this all coordinated. So I'm going to change this to coarse IK handle, and I'm going to change this to fine IK, fine locator. I don't know why I call this surface, I should call it scope. Okay? So that's essentially all the tools you need. And now you do what we've done before. And this is where, I think I've talked to you about this a little bit. This is where we want to animate one feature first and then go back and get the second. Okay? So I'm going to stop the tape there, and we're going to do one more commercial break.